Call of Duty is a series in which map design has been a bit of a hot topic for the better part of a decade. Being one of the most popular games ever made, a lot of people with a lot of opinions are going to be arguing about what design elements make the game best. However, most COD fans who can be bothered to look up from their snacks and subreddits have said something along the lines of, COD multiplayer used to be better. And while that sounds like nostalgia-blinded lunacy, I think there's actually a point here. There's definitely been a shift in quality over time. Even I, let's put it lightly, contrarian, can get behind this notion to some degree. But what led to this decline can spark debate. There's a lot to get into in regards to this, even without my contrarian opinions getting in the way, but that's far beyond the scope of this video. I'm here to talk about level design. What makes a good map, what made the maps worse over time, and what is the best map? To put it simply, why Terminal is the best multiplayer map. To understand why Terminal is so good, you need to understand multiplayer level design, specifically in the context of Call of Duty. What makes a good map? Well, what makes a map? To me, what makes a good multiplayer map is a combination of good design and good aesthetics. There's also a secret third category in that description, but we'll address that later. For now, let's start with the nuts and bolts map structure. Like a lot of multiplayer shooters, COD primarily relies on a 3-lane structure for its map design. For the unaware, 3-lane map design consists of 3 semi-distinct paths from one side of the map to the other, typically with one path being prioritized and some interaction between the paths. These are pretty strong bones from a design perspective, and if you start to look at COD maps, you'll see it everywhere. Staying within the Modern Warfare brand, let's look at the maps in the 2019 entry. Hackney Yard, left, right, and center lanes. Azure Cave, Cave, Town, Cliffside. Piccadilly. We'll address what makes this map so hated later, but even with a nightmare like this, you can vaguely see the flow of a left, right, and center lane. Now, 3-lane map design isn't an inherently bad thing, but if you've played more recent COD titles, you may have found the maps to be less interesting than they used to be, and you'd be right to think so. That isn't just nostalgia talking, that's a normal response to lazy design. Example, Shoot House, the plain oatmeal of map design. You have 3 lanes, and to spice things up a little, each lane has their own quirks. However, what makes the map so boring is that each lane is isolated. They meet at each end of the map and at choke points in the center, but that's more of a technical necessity than a tactical consideration. There's no natural flow between the lanes, which means that at almost any given moment you only need to focus on the glorified hallway that's right in front of you. This gets boring fast, so naturally, Terminal applies every possible solution in the book, as well as several that aren't in the book to prevent itself from ever getting stale. Let's look at the top-down map. At a glance, there's a pretty clear left, right, and center lane, but there's more than that. Take the top-down view and rotate it 90 degrees. Now try to draw a left, right, and center lane where these are the starting points. Atrium, hallway, tarmac. Go even further with this concept. Pick any start point or end point on the map and go there. Allow me to demonstrate. Burgertown to Airplane. You could go through the atrium and the boarding hallway, or you could go through the central hallway and the boarding hallway, or you could go through bookstore, jump out a second-story window and run up the slide into the cabin, or you could jump out the window at any point in the central hallway to get to the slide, or jump out this window, go under the boarding hallway, and up the slide. This openness with traversal applies almost everywhere on the map. Aspect 1 of why Terminal is good. It's highly maneuverable. That's why it works well in every game mode. You can play all the team-based modes fine, but this design works well even in free-for-all, a mode almost no other maps feel explicitly designed for. This is a tangent, but the way free-for-all map design works is dramatically less structured than team-based modes. If you're not playing with map structure, free-for-all will feel worse than other modes. Because Terminal has an almost grid-like layout as well as asymmetry, it powers through this issue and works well on a universal level without being a novelty. Anyway, yes, maneuverability. But many a COD map has been slaughtered on the field of maneuverability. What causes this? Well, what does an HGTV house have in common with Piccadilly Circus? Open concept, and being a reused joke. Piccadilly has some problems, but the biggest issue by far is the mishandling of being open. In theory, this social square area is meant to provide a variety of approaches to traversing the map. It allows you to cross the map faster, but there's less cover, creating a risk-reward scenario. In practice, you never go this way, because the deck is stacked so heavily against you that it makes the events of Modern Warfare 3 seem reasonable in comparison. While in this area, there's the obvious danger of being shot by someone else there, but you can also be sniped from the clothing store, and the way this sniper perch is designed is what makes more than half of the map unusable. If you get to this second story window, you have free range over a majority of the map, a high ground advantage, plenty of cover if anyone returns fire, and because there's only one way to access the second floor, you can just plant a claymore down and set up camp. The only real counters here are throwing multiple players into this meat grinder of a staircase, or using one of the other, worse, sniper perches to clear it out. Whoever controls this point essentially controls the map, which makes the map flow lopsided and frustrating. And this is not an issue exclusive to Piccadilly. Controlling the bridge in Euphrates controls Euphrates Bridge. Being at the top of Gustav Cannon gives you a massive advantage over anyone hoping to follow you there.
I won't lie to you, this is a pretty terrible experience.
Yeah, I don't like this at all.
Terminal fixes this problem by applying maneuverability to combat as well as movement. Not only can you get from any point A to any point B in a straightforward fashion, you can shoot that way too. No point on the map is truly secure, forcing you to actually pay attention to your surroundings in order to not catch a bullet. In direct contrast to 2019's sniping perches, let's examine the perch on Terminal. Like Piccadilly's clothing store, there's only one point of entry, but to start, it's dangerous. Climbing the exposed ladder in the atrium leaves you open to enemy fire for several seconds with no way to retaliate, and once you get there, you're not safe either. Piccadilly's clothing store has two main points you can be shot from. On top of the control room, there are dozens. You get the high ground on the tarmac, hallway, plane, atrium, and some other fragments of other places through doorways, but because you have no cover, someone in any of these places can shoot you back. The vast majority of areas can't be treated as a corridor crawl, but instead of encouraging the player to stay alert by introducing a wildly overpowered position, it brings every area up to a certain level of danger by putting it in context with the other areas. This makes the map both feel open and feel fair. This is also why it works in point capture modes like Control and Hardpoint. You have to fight to capture any area and fight even harder to keep it. It's not that there are no power positions, it's that every position has power. This is what good design looks like, people. It's getting shot at from 5 angles and having the power to cartwheel that into another 5 points for the kill streak tally. Now, I know you can't technically speak to me, so I'm going to field some potential questions. What's your favorite area? Control room, or as I call it, the hotbox. Why are you using gameplay clips from COD Mobile and Garry's Mod? Because, my lovely social rejects, I have been using that footage to prove a point about the universality of this map and you weren't even aware of it. Sometimes maps just don't translate well from game to game. For an obvious example, you can't include standard maps in games with advanced movement, or advanced movement maps in games without. For a less obvious example, look at how Wasteland feels completely different from every other map in Modern Warfare 2, because it's a port of a map from before the assault rifle was invented.
UAV recon standing by.
Terminal says f that and has design so immaculate it shines through even the Source engine with shitty lighting and whatever the hell engine runs COD Mobile. COD Mobile actually proves this point further. I'm not really happy to admit this, but I've logged a bit of time in COD Mobile, and something I've noticed about how players interact with map design is that it really boils a map down to its core pieces as a result of control limitations. Anything up to and including entire lanes will be mostly ignored by a player base that drops by half when recess is over. Except for Terminal, which has the exact same map flow as it does on platforms for the real gamers. Your brain wants to go to the action, but the action won't always occur in the same place, and you'll be able to interact with the action from almost any point on the map. It's so unfathomably good at guiding the player that it manages to do so even on a mobile FPS. It's so far above the other maps in that regard that it may as well be in space. Which it literally is. But Lockie, what if I agree with your points but still like the other maps better? Then you're not believing hard enough, sweetie, and we know what happens when you do that. This does bring up the point of aesthetics, though. Part 2 of why Terminal is good. Aesthetics. Aesthetics. Aesthetics are very important when it comes to map design. Not in the mechanics of the map itself, but in the experience of playing it. Remember Piccadilly? How I spent literal paragraphs meticulously tearing down its bad design? Yeah, I still kind of like it, and that's because of aesthetics. Sometimes a map just looks cool to you. That can have a lot of impact on your enjoyment of the map. I like airport maps because I think the aesthetics of airports are cool. You might not, that's okay and subjective. What's not subjective is that Terminal must be an airport. Look at Nuketown, another very famous map. We've seen Nuketown use the aesthetics of retroism, retrofuturism, futurism, Tetris, and
it's fast-paced firefights meets punk rock mosh pit.
The design stays the same, but the aesthetic can change. Look at a COD map you enjoy and ask yourself, can the aesthetic be different? Crossfire, that's just a street. You can retextualize that quite a bit. Shoot House, that's just 3 lanes. You can retextualize that drastically. Any Modern Warfare 3 map. That's just a mess. You can retextualize that into the fucking bin. Terminal is an airport. That is immutable. It cannot change. And that's because of the airplane. Part 3 of why Terminal is good. The airplane is the holy grail of game design, a piece of perfection sent by God herself to be presented in perpetuity so players can piss themselves at the sight of a placed claymore.
UAV online. I'm gonna care package.
Dude, this shit is fans and it's your fault. How do you feel about that?
The airplane is what really ties all of Terminal together. You couldn't have Terminal without the airplane. First of all, aesthetics. A commercial passenger jet is a pretty complex structure, and thus is very hard to abstract. This makes the airport setting of Terminal something you can't really change, giving it an aesthetic confidence that, to my knowledge, no other map truly shares. I wish more multiplayer maps did this. Abstraction in this context is boring. It leads to maps with functional design and no personality, like Shoot House, or every Counter-Strike map, or every Valorant map if that made you mad. Terminal's aesthetic is too strong and cannot be abstracted. It's confident, and as my roommate tells me constantly, confidence is sexy. I did just imply Terminal is sexy, and I agree with that. But aside from the aesthetic immutability of the airplane, what makes it shine in gameplay? Well, maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's a combination power position, traversal route, and meat grinder, and all of these serve to balance each other out by being true simultaneously. Power position. If you're at the side entrance, you have a height and cover advantage over the entirety of tarmac, and with an LMG you can absolutely go to town. If you're in the cockpit, you have a clear view over the hallway and extremely good cover against the people you're shooting at. If you're in the weird illogical tail of the airplane, you're scum, but you have a sightline over the entirety of the cabin. These are three very strong positions to hold, but they also turn the space into a meat grinder no not yet. Traversal route. There are two ways to get from tarmac to reception. Through the plane and under the plane. Through the plane is statistically likely to get you killed, but it's a bit faster and the only threats you'll really have to face are those in the airplane. Under the airplane dodges the meat grinder but leaves you far more exposed to someone elsewhere on the map. The act of how you navigate a straight line tube has a lot of depth to it. Now, meat grinder. The number of kills that come from the airplane rival the number of casualties in entire actual wars. Granted, they're the small ones, but that's still a body count. Each of the aforementioned power positions have such strong counterplay that you literally cannot hold them for more than a few seconds at a time. The cockpit is actually very reminiscent of the clothing store in Piccadilly, but it's boiled down to such a comical degree that it actually works in its favor. From the front, you have more cover than in clothing store, but from behind you have no cover and no buffer between you and a potential enemy. Place a claymore, you think to yourself, but unlike in some other games, claymores don't detonate instantly, so a smart player or bad placement can still lead to a knife in the back. Not to mention, that's just one potential entrance point you're covering. There are two others that you have to deal with, and unless you spider sense people's positions, you probably can't. The cabin door is arguably the most exposed position of all, because you can be flanked by either end of the plane, plus you have to deal with returning fire from tarmac, atrium, control room, and hallway. The tail end of the plane is... well, to be honest, it's one of the more bullshit areas of the map. If someone is camping there, you're likely to not know that unless they kill you once, but you're also likely to die if you stay there for long. Someone will come after you, and it's remarkably easy to be flushed out of this point. It's also worth noting that this point is in the one corner of the map people rarely go to, so its bullshit factor is minimized a bit. You can also get shot to ribbons while getting situated in that position. This area has as many asterisks as it does advantages, making the decision to use it a risk-reward choice, just like every other point on the plane. It's incredible, it's spectacular, it's what truly elevates the map. Terminal is a fascinating thing to me. Here you have Modern Warfare 2, popular art and pop culture, a game whose text seems to put as little thought into itself as possible, but within that you have Terminal, equal parts a feat of mechanical design and a work of art. It's a good map. It's the best map. No, I won't 1v1 you on it.
Never kiss a lady on the lips, have ya?